But we essentially have evolutionary game theory that describes interactions among organisms. And typically we focus on the predator and prey relations, as these are universal, right? If you've ever watched the Discovery Channel, I think you'll understand that, a lot of animals eat other animals. And so there are certain population dynamics that take place between them. A lot of these are describable with differential equations, as you said, that were developed in the 1920s. But for humans, there's something kind of unique in that these dynamics have manifested in the economic sphere, right? That we actually have predators of property,
Yes.
Or wealth, and we have those that own or create the wealth, or have the property relationship that are being preyed upon. And your paper like specifically demonstrates that there's a mathematical relationship here, that the internal rate of return on debt outpaces the internal rate of return on income over time. And that's what drives these systems to collapse, right? The actual prey gets predated fully or nearly fully. So the property and wealth of the prey collapses, which means the predator has nothing else to prey on. So the predator collapses. And what we're saying here when we say that, these aren't animal populations. This is civilization, right? This is the basis of civilization, property. It's just that you own the fruits of your labor. You own yourself and you own the fruits of your labor. And well, I guess another way to say this perhaps is that those who systemize the management of debt or the predation of private property are preying on those that work and create real economic value. So this would be the financial class, roughly speaking, right? They're just moving paper around, connecting buyers and sellers, but not adding any real economic value, not making buildings or factories or food, nothing that people actually consume. They're just connecting buyers and sellers, are preying on those that do create real economic value, right? The working class. And this entire relationship is describable in these fairly well put together set of equations and evolutionary game theory, right? That we've had for, about 100 years at this point.
And they're really simple. That's what they call ordinary differential equations. They're the simplest you can get.
Yes. So I guess, it sounds a bit radical, but what we're doing here, I think, is you're kind of removing the veil that there's a politician or someone in a position of government or working on Wall Street will represent themselves as someone that's adding value or organizing society or helping civilization exist. But it's actually the exact opposite, right? If you are a beneficiary of taxation or inflation, you're effectively a parasite on the human enterprise. That you're taxing, right? You're reducing the net wealth creation through the predation of private property. So I think that's a great intro to what we're talking about here. What I'd like to propose, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd like
to add something to that before you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, I wouldn't call it predation in the sense of exploitation. Human beings are, to me at least, pretty much like animals in the sense that they act in a way that is very, very selfish. And when they're in power, they tend to try to benefit only their own families and their own circles. And that's been going on for tens of thousands of years, of course. So I can't really judge them for being, what we are, humans. The only thing that I'm really pointing out is that scientifically, we can prove that's what they're doing completely. And we know why they're hiding it behind an arithmetic made up science, which is not science, which they call economics. That economics is just a made-up Ponzi scheme, just like fiat.
Specifically Keynesian economics.
Specifically that one.
Yes.
And you know, a lot of them before him too. I mean, if you really look at the life of Adam Smith, you'll find out that he was copying Cantillon. And you know, you find so many details you don't want to know about the people that you thought were supposedly you know, honest and knowledgeable, and they were not. They were copying other people, and they didn't really know much. And so eventually what you find is that the only science that I believe in is mathematics, because it just shows you what's going on for real. And then in the end, anybody who's producing value, not just the worker class, anyone like you, for instance, for me, you're one of the people who produces the most value in the internet. And anybody who teaches the world, anybody who tries to make the world better, and makes an effort on it, is creating value. So anybody who's creating value is being taken by the predators in government, essentially, and the cartels who manage government, because I don't believe government manages itself. Mm-hmm. And eventually, you know, technologies that are incredibly smart, and they're creating wealth, and they end up creating it for these guys more than anybody else. So anybody who's creating wealth is being taken a ride. They're taking a ride from him.
Right. Now that's a great clarification that there's a Darwinian impulse for self-preservation, right? This exists in all organisms, and that impulse, in a world where, you know, taking someone's wealth is an option, is something that's it's an option that's taken, right? If I can enrich myself by taking someone's wealth, maybe not I specifically, but maybe in certain circumstances, me specifically, I would do that, right? I would have an incentive to do that. So the name of the game, as far as I can tell, and we can tease this out further, is to make property violation or taking really expensive or risky or difficult, because the more difficult it is to take people's property, the less profitable it is to be coercive, let's say. And to that point, you know, as in nature, where we see predators engaging in all these unique strategies to get prey, right? Often using camouflage, for instance. It seems like statist government use a moral camouflage, or even an intellectual camouflage, perhaps, in the case of Keynesian economics, that they represent themselves as doing, right, whatever, you're being locked into your home for your own protection, or you're paying your taxes to support your community, whatever it may be. These are all forms of camouflage the predator is donning effectively to deceive the prey into giving up what the predator wants. So I think in that way, we could say that government is effectively the most organized crime in the world. So when you say there's cartels running the government, I would say they're basically indistinguishable at the highest level, right? It's the most organized form of crime known to man. That's how I would define government.
I agree.
So here's the proposal I'd like to make, and I'd like to tease out with you, is if there was some, and just speaking hypothetically, if there was some way to make property, the relationship between owners and their assets, an inviolable relationship or an unbreakable relationship, such that no one could steal anyone else's stuff, this would effectively nullify that predator and prey dynamic, right? The predator is preying on the property of the prey. So if they could not prey on that property, then predator and prey relations would be removed from human economic interactions. Now, that's not possible, clearly, because we have property that's in physical space. People can always engage in physical coercion to steal physical things. However, we do have Bitcoin, which we'll talk more about later, that is the first form of property that is extremely expensive to steal, to the point of being impossible if you custody it properly. So my proposal would be, how does something like Bitcoin affect the predator and prey dynamics that you have regarded historically in your work?
Well, unfortunately, I don't quite believe human beings are able to distinguish between their intellectual property, which is the biggest thing they have, and their material property. And if we're talking about material property, yes, I 100% agree. There's only one thing, and I don't know how it came about, because it's a miracle. For me, Bitcoin, and I've been studying for 7 years, because I was looking for something like Bitcoin to come along. And that's the reason why I have that name for my fund. And I'll explain why the name is Systemic Risk Averse. And the reason why I don't think people are ever going to be aware of how much they're not showing them and how much they're stealing from them is because human beings are the most amazing creators in the world. They can create wealth out of nothing, out of their minds. And that's the biggest wealth you have. But if you have been inculcated since you were a kid of certain things they've been educating you on, and other things that they're not telling you, for the last 100 years, ever since Rockefeller set up the Board of Education in 1903, they completely changed the American curriculum, and so did the Europeans. And they turned every new generation over the last 100 and some years into people who were too busy. They made them too busy to really understand the world. Especially the first 12, 14 years, the way it used to be, you went from K to eighth. That was it. Anything over eighth is whatever it is, you're keeping me busy for me not to understand what's happening. And so for the last century or so, they came up with the generations they wanted, people who could create a lot of money for them, be it from automobiles, from technology in the airplane business, or whatever, software eventually, and computers. And then they were not really adversaries, because all they knew was to create wealth out of their mind, but they didn't know why they had to do it the way they were doing it and who was benefiting from it. And so that is possibly the best kind of slave you can have, because that's a slave that is immensely productive. I mean, no other animal, robot, anything on earth can produce as much as a human being with his intellect. And then he thinks one way or another that what's going on is fine and is fair, and he spent the first 18 years of his life not really learning what was going on, and so he's never going to question it, and he's going to spend the whole life until he goes to 60, whatever, 70, and gave away most of his intellectual value and creation to these cartels. And so the only way that you can defend your property is by understanding. That's why I appreciate people like you so much, or Michael Saylor, people who tell the world how things really work. Because that's, to me, that's the only freedom you can get, understanding.
No, that's well said, and I appreciate you saying that. So I guess we could say at least that Bitcoin is a step in the right direction towards getting unbreakable or less breakable property, which can help ameliorate the predation of one class of people on another class of people. And it's a bit ironic here too, and I want to get into your experience in Venezuela, because socialism sort of ideologically identifies the problem, perhaps in a way that there's a predator-prey dynamic going on, but then Marxism specifically prescribes the exactly wrong solution, which is to abolish private property rather than make private property stronger.